Hi, today I want to talk about my current techniques for creating heads that can turn left and right and up and down. So this is the approach that I use for head turns. First I use a 3D reference model like Poser, Manga Studio, or Kamipo. Now this reference model is not the character that I'm animating, it's just one that's close, and it's specifically so that I can make sure that I get the 3D rotations correct. So I use Poser, Manga Studio, or Kamipo to rotate the head to the proper key views. And from those key views I create outlines of the reference, and those outlines just make it easier for me to see the features as I'm doing my animation or my creating the head turns. The next thing that I do is I create an initial view of the character that I am trying to animate, and I create the full character, but we're just going to focus on the heads. And then I create actions based upon the outlines. So I note the differences between the character that I'm animating and the reference model, and I just take those into consideration as I actually create the actions. Okay, so now let me walk through that process. My basic approach is to start with the reference that I know that if I do the head turns up and down or left and right, they will look good. Now the way I do that is create or get a 3D model from something like Poser, Kamipo, or Manga Studio and create the key images. The front view, left 3/4, right 3/4, up and down. Once I've created those images and then make sure they're all centered in a program like Manga Studio, I actually do an outline of the face. This makes it easy when I'm in Anime Studio to see the different versions of the face. So I have an outline for each of the key views. The next thing that I think is very important is to construct one of the views. I usually use the front view in a program like Manga Studio, and I may use many different reference images to create that initial view. Then I'll load that initial view into Anime Studio and create a rig character. Now I'm focusing on the head, but I'm really having the head as part of the entire character. So here's some of the details on how I construct the head in general. I have a bone for squash and stretch, which allows the head itself to squash and stretch. And then I have bones for down up, head turn, and eye size. Now I talk about this in other tutorials, but the way that I do the eyes is I have bones associated with the eye outline and the eyebrows, and bones for the eyes movement. So to have the eyes move, I just drag the main bone, and if I want to make him look cross-eyed, I can actually move those eyes that way. The eye size bone allows me to give a surprised and angry look easily. So for just a quick look at how I do the head construction, this is my current approach. Is I have eyes in a masking layer with the eyes being the mask and then the pupils. Mouth, I use the switch layer with all the standard views plus some additional views. And then for the hair, what I found is a hair on top, hair to the right and left, nose, and then face. Now the nose could be on the face, and I could put all of these together, but what I found is just with all the different points on the hair and everything, I found it's easier to put them on separate layers. Now this character has his ears covered by the hair, but if I had the ears, I could either have them as separate layers or part of the left and right views, or portions of the hair. Okay, so now for the technique of how I do the up and down and left and right turns. So this is the part where I import these outlines that I created in another program. And here's the important point that I found. If I don't have these reference lines, these reference views, what I tend to find is that I create a face that gets distorted as I move it left and right. Each individual image may look good, but when I actually animate it, it looks like there's distortion going on. So having these reference outlines is very helpful to me, even when I've got a different character than what I'm actually animating. So as we look at this one, my reference outline is from a different character, But let me show you how I can still use this. So let's look as we zoom in. So for example, I noticed that the eyes are a little bit above. In fact, the outline goes halfway through this eye. If I look at the nose is about at the same place. The mouth, though, is a little bit above, and I can see also the outlines of the side of the face. And if I look at the top of the head, I can see where the hair line is. Now, to make sure that these outlines are all lined up together, what I do is I always have a reference frame. And let's get rid of the animation, just look at the outline. I have a reference frame where I've got a line through the center of the face, and for the under part of the nose, the width of the neck, and specifically the bottom of the chin and the top of the hair. So what I do when I bring this in, I just use the reference frame, and I can then scale the layer so that it matches my head that I'm trying to turn. Now, one thing that I do is I put the origin at the bottom of the chin, and that way I can scale the entire layer very easily, and that will scale all of the reference images at the same time. Okay, so now I'm going to go into the detail on making this character look up. The first thing I'm going to do is turn on the outline for the front view, because that's the one that I'm starting with, and I'm going to open up that and change the opacity to about 30 in this particular case. Now that means that I can still see the eyes, but they're not too bold. I'm going to do the up outline, so I turn that on, and now you can kind of see why I have the front dimmed, because I want to focus on the up view, but I still want to reference the front view. So now what I do is I bring up the action window, and I'm going to do my down up. The second one is for my up looking. Now here's an interesting point that you'll notice as I start my down up, bringing up the action. I don't want to start every single character from scratch, so often I may modify an existing character. As a result, there may be some smart actions that are already in place. And as I've manipulated things, they might get messed up a little bit. So as I start this down up, we see the eyes are out of place and the mouth is out of place and all these things. So I'm still just going to go to the positions and delete the existing actions. Okay, so now that everything's deleted, you can see that no motions are happening. So the first important point is with these head turns, I want all the keyframes to be linear. That's because as I turn the angle of the bone, it's going to be a linear action. Now, when I actually animate the character, we can use smooth keyframes or ease in and ease out, but in constructing the head turn, we want these to be linear. Now the first thing that I will do is I'm going to select all the bones related to the eyes. Now if you'll notice, we take a look very closely at where the eye level starts. So the top of the eye meets the middle of my left eye. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take these bones and press shift and move them straight up until I get to that same kind of level at frame 48. I'm using 48 frames for my bone turns. Okay, so once I do that, that's the essential eye movement. Now you'll notice though, of course, that there's a little bit of perspective going on, and so I'm going to now go into individual bones and use shift and drag them a little bit to tweak the eyes. So that's what I do, is now tweak the eyes. Now as I do the tweak, what I'm trying to pay very close attention to is the angle that the eye has and the eyebrows. So notice that the eyebrows start off almost horizontal on my original person, and then they slant up, and so I try to make that happen on my character. Now, as much as possible, when I'm doing these head turns, if it's up and down, I want to try to move the bones only straight up and down. Same thing for points. And if it's a left and right turn, I want to do that only left and right. That allows me to combine the bones, combine the different turns as much as possible. The next thing that I'll do is I'll select the pupils and select all the points, and I'm actually going to squash them down a little bit, and maybe move it up just a tiny bit. So I'm not wanting to move the positions of the eyes. If I do that, I actually want to move the bones. I'm really just changing the shape of the eyes a little bit so that it has that perspective as it's turning up. And you may even want to deal with the pupils a little bit differently, but that's the tweak that I'm doing with the pupils. The next feature I'm going to work on is the nose, and so I just notice, I select all the points, and as I zoom in close I notice that the nose is almost exactly the same on both characters. This nose for this new character is a little bit wider, a little bit shifted to the right, and just a little bit higher. So as I take these bones, what I'm going to do is translate them, and so I'm going to translate them up, and I'm trying to just go straight up, and I may decide to squash them a little bit to give you a little bit, and I might even do a little bit of perspective here on these points. But then really what I want to do is I want to go in and tweak the points the way that I think is appropriate for this nose. Now I may also need to do things like layers ordering, change the layer ordering, because as the nose goes up I may want to do that. So for example, what we'll want to do here is I'm going to take these points and move them up like this, and these other points I'm going to move in a little bit closer. And what we'll want to do is have these points come in front, so we'll have to do some layer ordering. So the next thing that I'll focus on is the mouth. Now what I want to do there, let me turn off the mouth, I want to notice the lips in the front view and the lips in the up view, and what I'm going to do is just pick a point that I see, or a place, and how they are relative to the original drawing. What I mean is, in this AI mouth position, I notice that it's the very top of the teeth or at the top of the original outline lip. So when I drag them up, I'm going to make it so that this top of the teeth is at the top of the outline lip. Now I'm not going to worry about the curvature of the mouth right now. I'm just going to go through each individual mouth and move it up so that it aligns at the right place. Once I've moved all the mouths to the right place, I'm going to focus on the curvature of the lips, and notice it's a pretty significant curvature of the mouth as you go from the front position to the looking up position. So what I'll do is I'm going to use the bend points tool and then just bend the mouth down to a place that I think is relatively the same as we have for the outline. And then I just do that for each of the mouth positions. One thing you can pay close attention to is the corners of the mouth. How far do they come down? So if you get that right and the top, where the top part is, you'll have a pretty good idea. Now again, once you've finished this for all the different mouth layers, you need to tweak it so that whatever looks artistically right to you. So I'm going to stop with that, but basically that's the approach that I use, and I go for all the different layers, and then we go back and forth to test what's happening. And so that's how I do the head turns for my different characters. Hope that's helpful.